So once again, welcome everyone to Enhancing Efficiency and Impact, introducing the IDEA Assessment Data Power BI report. My name is Christina McDonald, and I'm a TA provider here at CED. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Arsham Zamani, who's a Power BI developer for CED. And together we co-facilitated the Power BI work group behind this report and are here to share the results with you today. Oops. Through our conversation today, we're going to take a little bit of a exploration through the assessment landscape, introduce you to the Assessment Power BI tool, give you a live demonstration of the tool, as well as take you through the GitHub and GitBook documentation so you know how to get a hold of the report and how to install it. Then we're also going to try to give you some time to have some discussion, talk with your colleagues a little bit about what you're seeing. And then we'll come back and share some supports that are available, some technical assistance to implement the report, issue a little call to action. And of course, being a data center, we are going to ask you for your thoughts and your feedback around our communication so that we can better deliver this content to you. Before we get started, though, I do have one little housekeeping item. Our agenda is really packed today, and we're a pretty large group. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so please, we invite you to put your questions in the chat while we are talking, and we're going to try to address them as much as we can through the presentation. That will help us roll through the content as quickly as possible so that we can carve out that time for you all to be able to unmute and chat later on in the presentation. So with no more ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with a little bit of background or context. And by context, I mean, let's kind of take a moment and step back and consider why we're here and what it is that we're trying to accomplish with all of this work that we're doing through the CEDS data standard, the data warehouse, and through software like Generate. The ultimate goal is really for us to bring together data from all the different sources and collections and methods that we're using across the programs in our states in such a way that can effectively and efficiently be analyzed and used for reporting purposes, of course, but also to support the acquisition and maintenance of funding, to improve the quality and effectiveness of the learning opportunities and outcomes for children and youth in our state, and all the pieces and the personnel that go into making that happen. So when we take a step back and take a look at our data through that lens of the broader purpose, we can see our data in terms of a life cycle or a journey. And when we do that, we realize that EDFacts reporting is really only one stop, and it's often the first stop on the data's journey. Getting the data compiled, analyzed, reported for EDFacts is only the beginning. There are many additional requirements, reporting elements, and uses for this data that happen after the EDFacts file is submitted. Okay, so let's take a moment and dive into that landscape for assessment and what that journey looks like specifically for assessment data. So many of us, especially those of us on the data system side, may look at the EDFacts reporting as the federal requirement for assessment data. And it really is a federal reporting requirement, but it is not the only federal reporting requirement for assessment data under IDEA. The EDFacts submissions are only the first step in reporting for IDEA. There are actually two more that happen after it. There's the annual performance report and the public reporting requirements. And this is only IDEA. I'm not going to get into Title I and all the other programs that also report on this data. I'm going to really stay focused on IDEA today. So for the IDEA data, what is getting reported where? Well, we're all pretty familiar with the EDFacts submissions. There are 4 key files that are submitted, the FS 185 and 188 that really deal with participation in the assessment, 175 and 178, which capture proficiency, and then the related metadata files. Following that, there's the annual performance report, which you may have heard referred to as the APR or the SPP APR or some variation in our acronym soup. But essentially what it means is it's the State Performance Plan Annual Performance Report, and it's due in February every year. Within the APR, there's an indicator specific to assessment. It's called Indicator 3, and under this indicator, states have to report on 4 different measures related to the participation and proficiency rates for students with IEPs on both the regular and the alternate assessments, as well as on the gap in the proficiency between students with IEPs and all students. This indicator is based on the data collected through EDFacts, but it goes through a step further in terms of the analysis. In addition to the APR, states are required to publicly report their assessment data as it pertains to students with IEPs. This reporting needs to include data related to the participation of those students, broken out by their disability status, grade level, and assessment type, as well as their proficiency, again broken out by disability status, grade level, assessment type, and their proficiency status. So that is a lot of reporting. What if I told you there's more? In addition to the federal reporting, there are also federally required uses of the data at the state level. Assessment data feeds into the state's general supervision and monitoring systems for overseeing the implementation and compliance of the implementation of IDEA. It's also included in states' LEA determinations process, helping states identify which LEAs are meeting requirements, who might need assistance, intervention, or substantial intervention in their implementation of IDEA. And also, students with disabilities are an important subgroup when looking at assessment data to designate schools that are in need of improvement under Title I. So why is all this important? Why do we want to take that step back and look at the entirety of the assessment data journey? Well, it really goes back to our original goal, to bring together efficiently and effectively and be able to analyze and use the data to support learning experiences and outcomes for students. The CEDS data warehouse helps us with the first part of that goal. It helps bring that data together. So now how do we use the warehouse to not just report EDFacts data, but also to get us all the way through that journey to the point of impacting student learning? That's where the report design and development work group comes in. This work group was formed to do just that, to step back and say, the data's there. Now what can we do with it? How can we use it to make our jobs easier so that we can get to that end outcome of supporting kids? So who is the report design and development work group? I want to take a moment here and really shout out for the states that participated in the work group. Because let's be honest, it is not easy to find time amidst all the responsibilities and demands of your workday to make the investment in a work group like this. But these states recognized that as what it was, an investment that would save them time and money down the road. So a very big thank you to the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, Kentucky, Maine, Nebraska, Nevada, North Dakota, and Oklahoma for joining us and making that investment a part of the journey. Because honestly, without their creativity and dedication, we would not be here today. I also want to thank the 2 states who willingly took on the impossible and corralled both their data and their program staff together at the same time to share feedback on this report. They really let us know what we needed to do to make the report more flexible so that it could bring value to them and help their work in their unique context to their states. So a very special thank you to New Hampshire and Utah. So the work of the report design and development work group began with really identifying their vision for data in their states and what their areas of greatest need were. They shared that they really wanted their data to be accessible, to be able to get the data to audiences beyond just the program directors. They wanted to reach the administrators, the classroom teachers, and other interested parties. They wanted to build a shared ownership of data, to move away from this is my data and this is your data and make it our data in the same way that these are not your students or my students, they're our students. And they wanted their data to be dynamic and interesting to those who are not enamored of data. Clearly, those people are not on this call today. They also took some time to identify what areas they needed support in. And obviously, assessment came up, otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about it today. But they also identified early childhood environments and exiting data as key areas of need for their states. And through these conversations, the group really explored what it was like to report on assessment data in their states. And what really surfaced was these public reporting requirements. They shared that in their states, by and large, this is a very labor intensive process. It's very cumbersome. Their state report card systems don't address all of the unique aspects of assessment data as it pertains to students with IEPs. So they have to prepare separate Excel or PDF documents, often LEA by LEA, and the reports that they're able to generate are static. And they're very difficult for different audiences and interested parties to get the information that they need and be able to use it effectively. So, what they said is they wanted some way that they could just push a button and have the reports be generated. So, that's what we do. We tried to create a push button report for special education assessment data, one that would dramatically alleviate that current data burden that these states are feeling, meet all the federal requirements for public reporting of assessment data under IDEA, as well as be dynamic so it can meet the needs of a range of interested parties in their states, such as the state leadership, community partners, families, advocacy organizations, and the general public. So, what did that process look like? Well, the work group dug in and outlined the key components that were needed to meet the requirements, plus additional components that they felt would be helpful to for different target audiences. So they wanted to do proficiency and participation, but they also wanted to look at that 1% threshold for participating in the ALT assessment. They also wanted to include things like accommodations and present that gap analysis right there. But they needed it to work for a public report. There needed to be suppression thresholds, and they wanted to integrate it right into their own websites and not have it be a separate standalone thing. Throughout this process, we asked them to ask for the world. And really, they did. They surfaced some truly amazing ideas, which laid out some potential directions for continuing to move this work forward. And we really wanted to do them all, but we had to recognize the practical constraints of time and budget. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to be presenting this report to you today. It would still be developing. So, what we did is we created a parking lot for future development. And so, all of you developers on the call, your project staff, take note of these ideas and of the ones that you think of as we're going through this, because we created an amazing foundation for this report. The work group got it started, but there's a lot of room for it to grow. So when you see what we have to show you, we want you to get excited, not just about what you're seeing on the screen, but the possibilities that you see and what would help you with your work. So together, let's ask for the world, and together through the open source community, let's see how far we can take it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arsham, who is the wizard behind the curtain, who brought all of these groups' ideas to life to show you the report.
Thanks, Christina. So before we dive into the report, I want to go over some prerequisites on how you can set up the report. So first and foremost, you need to be a generate or CEDS state because the report uses views that utilize the CEDS elements. Next, you need to have 3 years of data migrated into Generate for the EDPAS files. It doesn't necessarily have to be 3 years of data, but for some of the visuals that do year-over-year analysis, it would be helpful to have at least 3 years. And as for the EDPAS files, you're going to need the academic achievement and assessment participation files for math, reading language arts, and science. And then finally, you're going to need the latest version of Power BI Desktop, which is free, and a Power BI Pro license. So you need Desktop to connect to your data source, and then you need the Pro license to publish from desktop to the Power BI service. Now, if you're not a Power BI state, we still think there's an opportunity for those states to contribute back to the collaborative exchange. I'm going to elaborate on that later in this presentation. Next slide there. Thanks. And so for our open source model that we're using, the embedded report documentation and all setup is on the CID reports GitBook. And then once you've gotten background information and setup instructions, all of the files to get started are posted on the CEDS Collaborative Exchange CID reports repo in GitHub. So what is the benefits of using this open sourced model is that it's an iterative development process with version history and control. So this assessments report that is posted is not going to be the last version of the report, but everyone in the community can take ownership and provide improvements, bug fixes, and suggestions with while knowing the version history control. And then another benefit, of course, is the reduction of duplicative efforts and an efficient use of resources. So instead of every CEDS state, which all have the same requirements to publicly report on this data, to make their own version of the report, they can use this template that's provided to get them 90% of the way there, and of course apply their own formatting, suppression logic, accessibility to get them to the finish line. And then I think there is some benefit for some standardization for states that collaborate and to provide insight on what works for them. So without further ado, I think it's time to show off the report. So I'm going to share my screen here. And then, Christina, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, so right now I am showing off the report in the Power BI service. Now, this report is intended to be embedded on a public state site, and it's supposed to be in a scrollable format. So right now it's kind of zoomed out. So I'm going to zoom in to imitate what it would look like in this scrollable format. So one thing I want to mention is that we used cached test data for this report. We try to simulate realistic scenarios based off of a state that we were looking at. But please, this is test data, so don't take any one value too seriously or a face value. And then this report is segmented into 3 subject areas. So you have math, reading language arts, and science. So you have the same metrics that you're toggling between those 3 core subject areas. But before we dive into the report, I wanted to look at the menu bar selections at the top, which really what makes this report interactive. So first we have an information button. So when you click this, it gives a quick synopsis and overview of the report. And of course, all of the verbiage and all of these visuals can be tinkered with. And then we have a shortcut button. So this is a neat built-in accessibility feature from Microsoft. So when you hover over this button, it gives instructions on how to access those keyboard shortcuts. So it says to click Shift plus question mark. So we're going to do that. And then we get a whole host of shortcuts. This is great for folks that rely on keyboard navigation. So one of my favorites is the Alt plus Shift 11, which shows everything as every visual on the page as a data table. And then there is an export button. So this, when you hover over it, gives instructions on how to show the visuals as data tables. So when you do embed this on an external site, it kind of depends on what level of licensing you have for the export to Excel feature. But as a compromise, I did provide instructions on how to show as data tables. So if we go to an example bar chart here and right click, and then click show as a table, you can get a data table version of that visual. So that's kind of what it would look like when it's on the external site. And then finally, what makes this report interactive is the filters. So when you click the filters button, you get a slicer panel with a whole host of different filtering options. So we have school year, which is single select, and then we have LEA. And then based off of the feedback that we got from the work group, when you select an LEA, that LEA's name will show up in the title of the report. Then you have school, let's select LEA, school, you have assessment type administered, race, grade, sex, primary disability, and then a bunch of statuses: homeless, English learner, military connected, foster care, and migrant. And so when you make these selections and you close out, you can see these selections that you've made at the top here. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to clear filters for now. Okay, so that's the menu bar. So I think we're ready to really dive into this report. So right now we're in the math section. And so these top three gauges here are different performance metrics on participation rates. So the top left here is what is the percent of students with disabilities participating in the assessment. So in this fictitious scenario, 80.29% of students with disabilities participated in the assessment. And in this middle gauge, of those students, how many of them opted for the alternate assessment? So 10.12% took the alternate assessment. And then to comply with the public reporting, in this third gauge, we have the total students. So students with disabilities and without disabilities, how many of them participated in the alternate assessment? And so based off the 2% threshold rule in the public reporting requirements, anything past that 2% is formatted as red here. So those are the participation rates. And then we have this year-over-year analysis that I mentioned previously. So I'm going to spotlight this. So this shows the assessment proficiency over time. So the orange line is students with disabilities, and that tealish blue line is all students. So for example, if we look at 2023, in this scenario, 59.51% of students with disabilities score proficiently on the math assessment, and then 59.09 for all students. I realize this might not be a realistic scenario, but again, it's test data. And then that second number there is the percent difference from the previous year. So for students with disabilities, it's a minus 1.05% drop from 2022, and the same for all students, minus 1.74%. And then the bottom three bar charts, more specifically lollipop charts, are proficient assessment rates for students with disability by different categories. So this top left one is by disability type. So for example, 63.28% of students with autism score proficiently, again, on the math assessment. Then we have by accommodation type. So if I scroll down here, of the students with disabilities, 30.27% who used Braille scored proficiently on the math assessment. And then finally, we have segmented by grade level. So we can see pre-K was the highest performer with 66.32% scoring proficiently, and we can see that grade 3 scored the lowest with 54.55%. So that's pretty much all of the visuals that we have in the report. And then again, this is the same setup for reading language arts and science. And one thing I did want to mention in the filters panel here, we can see that we filtered out students that are have a medical emergency. We filtered those students out from the registration counts. And then I believe for reading language arts, the first-time English learner students should already be filtered out based off of the setup in the CEDS warehouse. And so another thing I wanted to mention is that we did use percentages all throughout the report. The work group felt that this met the requirement for public reporting, and I think it's just a safer option than actually displaying counts, especially when we're posting this for the public. As for suppression, all counts behind these percentages are suppressed under 10. And then accessibility, we try to follow accessibility best practices in terms of color, formatting, fonts, tab order, alternate text. But again, states should follow their accessibility checks before posting. So that's pretty much the entirety of the report. The next piece that I wanted to go over with you guys is documentation. So how do you set up this report? So I'm going to toggle over to our GitBook page. Dan or Christina is going to drop a link to the GitBook page down below so you can follow along or navigate to it after this session. You should see a link in the chat with this GitBook page, so you can follow along if you'd like. So on this welcome page, you'll come to the report guides. Once you get here, you'll see our previous report that we did, and then the current report we're presenting on, the IDA state assessments. So starting off, you'll have an overview page. So this just gives a quick synopsis of the purpose of the report, and then detailing just each section. So math, reading, language arts, and science. And then what I really love about GitBook is that we can actually embed the test report here. So everything that I just presented to you with all of the cache test data is available for you to interact with. So if you want to see if this is a good fit for your state, you can come in and play around with this report before you even meet the prerequisites. So I think that's great. And then again, I recommend that once you go full screen here, that you kind of zoom in so that you can see better and can scroll through like how it would be if you embedded on an external site. Okay, and then at the bottom here, you have some features. This is everything that I already mentioned in the live demo. So the data suppression, adjustable features, and keyboard shortcuts. Okay, in the next page, you have a setup guide. So the prerequisites, which I went through with you guys in the PowerPoint, and prepping your CEDS data warehouse. So we developed the report using custom SQL views. So these views are available on the collaborative exchange on GitHub. So there is direct links to get there. So you would come in here, download your custom SQL view into your SQL management tool. So once you've done that, you're ready to connect to your report to your instance of CEDS. So you'll download the report, again, on the collaborative exchange. There's a direct link. You would open up the report in Power BI Desktop, go to the data source settings, and then put in your database's credentials. And then after that, you should start seeing data flowing through your report. And then once you're done with that, there's instructions on how to set up your own Power BI workspace in the Power BI service and how to publish your report from Power BI Desktop to Power BI service. And then there's instructions on how to refresh the report and set up a scheduled refresh. And then, of course, since this is going on an external site, I'm sure states would want to use their own color theme and their own logos. So there's instructions on how to change the color theme within Power BI Desktop. And then finally, data suppression. So this is a good segue to explaining the next section, which is the data dictionary, which is all new for this report. So based off of feedback that we got from the CEDS conference, there were states that are not Power BI states that use another tool such as Tableau. So we want a chance for those states to still contribute to the collaborative exchange and still to engage with these reports. So as a compromise, we set up a data dictionary with all of the calculations that are made specifically in Power BI, and an opportunity for states that use another tool to translate these calculations to whatever language it is in their tool. So for example, we started off with, I believe, like 20 measures or so. And so it was a good exercise to consolidate those measures. I think we're at 8 now. So these are all calculations that are made in Power BI. And all of these are mapped to visuals within the template here. And then there's a description of each of these measures, and then the DAX code, which stands for Data Analysis Expressions. And so a state that doesn't use Power BI can pretty much use the SQL views, connect to the warehouse, and then they can recreate these measures, take this code, and translate them to their own tool, and then pretty much essentially recreate the report. And it's a great opportunity because then they can give back to the collaborative exchange and post the report as a new tool template. So that's a great opportunity to contribute to the collaborative exchange if you don't use Power BI. And then lastly, we have a support page with contact information on how to reach out. So that is the GitBook documentation. The last thing that I want to show you is the CEDS Collaborative Exchange on GitHub. So once you navigate to the Collaborative Exchange, there is a repo specifically for CID reports. And you'll see different folders for each of the reports, but I'll first draw your attention to the README page. So as a welcome section, and then importantly, it has development guidelines. So this should mimic what the development guidelines are for the generate repo. But just in short, what you would do if you want to contribute to the reports, you would essentially fork a branch from the development branch. You would make your changes, and then you would submit a pull request. Either I or Dwayne would approve those pull requests, and then we would push those changes up to the main branch. So that's a little bit about how to contribute to this repo. All the instructions should be posted below, and there's plenty of documentation by GitHub itself. But diving in, if we go into the assessments folder here, you'll find all of the files that are necessary to set up. So the SQL views, the data dictionary in an Excel template, and of course the Power BI file in a .pbix format. And then we also have our GitBook documentation linked here. So there is actually an opportunity to contribute to the documentation by changing this GitBook docs folder as well. So that's a little bit about the collaborative exchange. So I've gone through a live demo, gone through the documentation in GitBook, and then here is where you can find all the files to get started in GitHub. So thank you guys for listening to me. I'm going to pass it back to Christina.
Thank you, Arsham. So is everybody excited yet? I hope you're bubbling over with ideas. I know I was incredibly excited as we developed this report. This was something I never would have had access to when I was in my state, although they've done a lot of work since I left, but we never had this kind of flexibility in our reporting. So I'm hoping you're feeling as excited as I am. So we're going to take a few minutes right now. We're going to break out into some breakout rooms to just kind of give us a chance to kind of process what we just saw, share what you think is exciting, what questions you have, because we are a rather large group. We don't really want to try to do it in this big group. So we're going to split up into some smaller groups. I hope you all had an amazing conversation. We had some wonderful ideas coming up in our group and some enthusiasm for being able to do this and the pressure it would take off of a lot of the states. So I'm hoping it was the same for all of you. We are going to just sort of drop in the chat the evaluation link because we do know that, we're getting close to that time to transition. We want you to have a chance to do that. We're going to keep talking, but please do take a few moments and kind of fill out that evaluation while we are continuing our conversation. So I know in my group, this was a conversation that came up, what kind of supports are available in order to help states get this report set up on their systems. We had one state in particular that wasn't a CEDS data warehouse, but we certainly can have some conversations and possibly give you some pointers and some tips in terms of setting it up on your system. But definitely reach out to Sid. We're happy to guide you through the process of getting and setting up these views for the data warehouse, linking to the report, and doing some troubleshooting or validation with your data after it is installed. And we also encourage you to get involved in the open source community and some of the other groups that are, working on this sort of stuff. There's the Generate Governance group. There's also data reporting work group, like the group that did this work. That was one thing we talked about in our group as well, is the hope that we'll be able to do this again in the future. Because it really has created some amazing fruit for all of the states to be able to use, to leverage, and to grow. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and put the QR code up on the screen in case that's easier for you. The link is in the chat. Please do take a few moments, share your feedback, let us know how well we did communicating this information to you. So that we can continue to improve. And thank you all so much for joining us today.
Hey, Christina, this is Dan. And in our breakout group, we had an interesting question come up about suppression.
Mhm.
Arsham, I don't know if you wanted to summarize, because I think that might be interesting for everyone.
Sure, I can pose a question if Christina you want to answer, but the question was on what the requirements were about posting percentages versus counts. I think there was confusion on if actually counts are required versus just percentages.
Mhm. So most states do go with percentages because of confidentiality and suppression, especially when you're a state that has a lot of smaller districts. Those counts can, even if they are above 10 or whatever your suppression threshold is, they do become a lot more identifiable. So percentages give you a bit more leeway in that respect. It also helps you compare from district to district because, your large districts compared to your smaller districts, the counts aren't going to make a lot of sense in terms of comparing them. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, Arsham and Christina.
Questions or exciting thoughts that came up from the other groups?
There was a lot of excitement. As the tool is publicly facing, there were some questions and concerns about PII, and Arsham was able to explain how, this limits access, but provides limited access to the public. You're allowed to set your own suppression rate, and also, I think one task that SEAs take on to ensure that personally identifiable information is maintained as private is that secondary level of suppression where you wouldn't be able to logically deduce anything about a particular group that you were trying to suppress, which is built into the report, which I think is really powerful for SEAs.
Absolutely. All right, and with that, we're right at the 3:30 mark. So I am going to say thank you all one more time. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, and being an almost Friday, a wonderful weekend. Thank you again for joining us, and feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions or would like some additional support.